So we have our the name figure 1. Now we're going to create our caption. And as I mentioned, you don't need a separate title and caption. You can just have one caption. So let's just call this proportion of contributions of group members. Put a period at the end. And again, since everything is going to be Times New Roman size 12, we'll also change this. And that is all you need. I did mention that you should refer to your figure in the text, which means you might say something like, something brief. Since you do have the figure with the other proportions in it, you don't need to necessarily list each of the different proportions. You can just start to lead the reader through the figure so they can understand what they should be looking for. And again, you'll change this to Times New Roman size 12. And another thing you'll want to do, I'm just going to hit Control A to select everything. I'm going to change this to 2.0, so the spacing will be double spacing. APA style, in addition to being Times New Roman size 12, is also all double spaced. So this is what you would have for including a figure. And here you could have this at the end of the sentence or at the beginning of the sentence. Although this part is italicized, you wouldn't italicize it in the reference in the text. So there you can kind of get a sense for how to format that. If you have any additional questions about formatting figures, definitely let me know. I will also go through how to format tables later on when we talk in more detail about the group project. So to summarize, what we did is first we sorted the numerical column, column B, so that the numbers were in order from largest to smallest. Then we inserted the figure here, and we picked a monochromatic color scheme since this is an academic manuscript. Then we removed the outer border, so you can see when you click off of it, there's no outline. You can just see it's white space until it gets to the grid in the background. Then we changed the font style and size to Times New Roman size 12. We removed the title since we added the caption, and we italicized the figure and the figure number, and then we just provided a brief description of the figure followed by a period after the actual figure. So looking at Module 8, which the title is Reasons for Unreason, it provided 4 reasons why sometimes people are unreasonable. These 4 reasons are listed on page 75 and then elaborated on throughout the module. In general, our ability to make snap judgments can be very adaptive. It can keep us from doing things like burning our hand on a stovetop or from being run over by a bus, but sometimes it does lead us astray. The first reason for unreason, preconceptions controlling our interpretations. One example of this is when research participants were shown a summary of fake research conclusions that provided mixed evidence for something. People's views actually became more different than similar. It actually polarized their views. In this instance, it was views on the death penalty. So they were presented with fake research conclusions talking about the death penalty. And each participant perceived the evidence that supported their own viewpoint as valid, but they were very critical of the evidence that was counter or against their viewpoint. That represents how preconceptions can control our interpretations, because everybody saw the exact same conclusions. It was their preconceptions or their beliefs in whether or not the death penalty was okay that controlled or colored their interpretation of that document. The second reason for unreason is that people tend to be swayed by anecdotes or stories more than statistical facts. So one instance of something can sometimes have more impact than statistics that look at a group of 100 people as opposed to one person. So anecdotes can sometimes be more influential than actual facts. one example of this, the easier it is to recall or remember something, the more likely we think it is. That represents the availability heuristic. And the vividness of an example can also influence how memorable something is. And this might be because it actually triggers an emotional reaction in our brain, which paired with memory makes it something we're much more likely to remember. Anytime there's some kind of emotional reaction, especially if it's something that's related to fear, if there's some perception of danger, then we're much more likely to remember that. And this could be an evolutionary thing. If we don't pay attention to dangerous things, we'll be less likely to survive. So we want to remember things that could be dangerous, that instill fear in us. The third reason for unreason is that we tend to misperceive correlation and control. So we form a belief, whether it's from one single instance or a number of instances, and then we tend to pay attention to supporting evidence, things that correspond with that belief, that support it, and we're less likely to notice and remember events that are inconsistent with that belief. So this is kind of related to the confirmation bias, but this is the illusory correlation. And while you're reading on the illusion of control, pay attention to how that matches up with attributions for outcomes, whether they're favorable or unfavorable. And last, our beliefs can influence our behavior towards others, creating, in a sense, a self-fulfilling prophecy. The prophecy is our prediction of others' behavior, and the self-fulfilling part refers to the way you, the self, can actually influence their behavior. So if you're meeting people and you're told they're friendly, you're more likely to behave in a friendly way towards them in anticipation of them being friendly towards you. So they respond to your friendliness in kind, confirming your expectations, whether or not they were accurate. But if you're meeting someone new and you're told they're a nasty person, you're more likely to be nasty yourself, which would actually make them be more likely to respond similarly nastily. So you're actually eliciting these reactions from others, which are called behavioral confirmation, because they're behaving in a way that confirms your expectations. So if you have a positive view of the world and expect others to be friendly, you'll actually have interactions with them that will be more likely to be positive. Module 9 looks at how behavior and belief is related. So if you choose to fill a social role, if you elect to fill a social role, let's say you choose to run for president of some campus organization or a campus group, then your behavior can be influenced by that role. So if you are running for president, you may behave more assertively than if you are a member of a group rather than in a leadership role. One of the most famous studies in psychology studied the influence of imposed roles on behavior. So being assigned a role can also influence your behavior, and more than you might think. So one of the things that you'll do this next week is watch a video about this famous study, the Stanford Prison Experiment. This module also answers the question, do attitudes affect behavior, or does behavior affect attitudes? And your textbook discusses two explanations for why the second one is true. So why attitudes follow behavior. And the difference between these refers to, or entails whether or not we know what our beliefs are. So the first theory that explains why attitudes follow behavior, cognitive dissonance theory, is when we know what our beliefs are. And if we have inconsistent beliefs, so if we have two beliefs that are competing with each other, then we'll change one of those beliefs so that we don't feel that dissonance or that tension, that uncomfortable feeling anymore. And interestingly, if we have a belief that's inconsistent with our behavior, rather than changing our behavior, which seems like it would be the more logical thing, we'll actually change our belief. And this helps explain why some people keep smoking even if they know it's associated with health risks. They may change their belief to say, well, I only smoke 2 cigarettes a day, so it's not really that bad. So they'll kind of justify their beliefs rather than changing their behavior, quitting smoking. The second explanation, self-perception theory, is when our beliefs are not clear. So we aren't necessarily sure how we feel about something or what we think about something. So if we know how we behave, but we aren't sure about our beliefs, we'll actually use our behavior as a guide to decide what we believe about something. So if we don't know how we feel about smoking, but we know we smoke, then we'll use that information to decide, well, we must not really feel that bad about smoking because we're doing it. So you can think of self-perception theory as being like the fundal attribution error, but pointed towards ourselves.